rolling cart.
Okay. Ready? All right, I will call this meeting to order. It is 7:01. This is the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of the City of Richfield. It's January 21st, 2025. We'll start with the open forum. You can always refer to the HRA agenda and web page for additional ways to submit comments. We have a couple people, and I think I see someone else filling up a card as well. So we'll start with open forum then. Scott, do you want to come up? And thank you for filling out the card. We have your information. Typically, we give people about 3 minutes and then can follow up with your information here if there are follow-up questions.
All right, do I need to sign in at this sheet?
Yes, please do.
Is that part of my 3 minutes, or does it start with my smart
No.
talk?
You're okay. We don't get a lot of people coming to the HRA, so I'll have to even figure out how to work the timer. There you go. Okay.
All right, thank you. Is this good enough? Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening. My name is Scott Dahlquist. I have been a Richfield resident since 1991, and I'm a member of Wood Lake Lutheran Church, which is across the street from the former Crossroads apartment building, now known as Concierge. The transformation of this property into its current form was difficult to watch. The property has become an asset to the community and a home to those who can afford it, but at the cost of displacing many who were clearly not welcome anymore. In the end, I concluded that what was done was legal, but I will not call it just. Our current state of urban homelessness is the product of many factors, some within individual control and many not. Stable housing is the foundation of a successful life. Without it, it is difficult to address the many problems of life which befall all of us in one way or another. The ability to own property and maximize its use is also one of the foundations of our economic system, which has provided all of us with many benefits, but which also produces many inequalities. This is a system in which we have all played a part, individually and collectively, by things we have done and left undone. I therefore urge this Commission to recommend the approval of a memorandum of understanding supporting a request for financial assistance and 4D tax status from Hempel Real Estate for the acquisition and preservation of the 3 identified affordable rental communities. I believe this action will help to ensure the presence of naturally occurring affordable housing within our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, next I have David Snyder, and if you have your card,
Hello, I'm Dave Snyder. Been a Richfield resident for about 7 years. I live right by the high school, and my son's a senior there. He's late sometimes, but he's a good student. I could just say ditto to what Scott said, but I'll be brief, but give my input too in support of the memorandum of understanding. I've been a housing justice advocate for a really long time, and I think it's okay for our community to invest some money with a responsible developer that's going to maintain affordability. I know people who live at some of the 3 apartment complexes named. I've done national night out events there with previous mayor and police officers and registered voters there, and my kids have gone to school with kids from those complexes. So I think that a modest investment in maintaining those as stable places where working class folks can live is a good thing. I appreciate that you guys are thinking about not, what precedent are you setting? It can't be universalized, and I appreciate that, and I think it's laudable, really. But I think that it's still a worthwhile investment. The persnickety, person on this side of my shoulder is saying, well, okay, it's going to be a couple bucks from our property taxes to pay for this subsidy. How much do renters in this city and other parts of the country pay? What little part of their taxes go to subsidize my mortgage interest deduction? They probably didn't have a chance to say yes or no to that, but I'm glad it happens, but I also think it generates some inequalities, as Scott was saying. Last thought, I do think that the provision that I've heard about having some measure or agreement to formally require Hempel and the city to meet with tenants regularly to address issues before they get out of hand is really important. Again, I've been doing housing justice work for decades, and there really is no substitute for having tenants who are living in a building have an opportunity to say, hey, this is going on, that's going on. I won't get into all the stories that I could tell. I could do that off the record. But it's really important, and there's no substitute for it. So I hope that there's some way to put that into the agreement. It even staves off bigger conflict by making sure that issues are addressed as they come up. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, next I have Melissa.
Good evening, Mayor Supple and all who are present. My name is Melissa Melna-Gonzalez. I'm pastor of Tapestry, a church here in Richfield. I'm here to say a few words regarding consideration of the Memorandum of Understanding supporting a request for financial assistance and 4D tax status from Hempel Real Estate for the acquisition and preservation of 3 affordable rental communities. I have looked at the information, and to be honest, much of the actual financial piece is beyond my scope of understanding, and so that is not why I'm here this evening. Other people much more versed in that can make those particular decisions. However, my overall sense is that preserving this housing as affordable for some of the most vulnerable in Richfield is crucial. We have found that with that, obtaining housing in the city of Richfield is quite difficult, and many who would like to live in Richfield are unable to find adequate and affordable housing. Even some of the affordable units are adding or bolstering requirements for W-2 income, specifically W-2 income, and specifically at 3 times or more the amount of rent, or requiring at least a year's rental history. Even what is considered affordable is a challenge for many to be able to pay the rent. Most of those we serve at Tapestry are not able to find housing in Richfield, and this is a loss to this community. If indeed Hempel has a good track record for preserving affordable housing, it seems that this one-time decision would be favorable overall. I understand there are some drawbacks with a relatively small increase for other naturally occurring affordable housing. The alternative of allowing a for-profit owner who could potentially upend all of these units, as occurred with Crossroads in 2015, now Concierge, would not benefit the city or the tenants in particular, especially as the housing supports many who receive some sort of governmental assistance. One of the issues with Crossroads was that the result of that purchase was to displace a very large number of people from federally protected groups according to housing law. Possible litigation if these individuals and families were displaced again would be another aspect that I imagine the city has or will consider. I was directly involved with Crossroads as a new pastor in 2015, where I met Dave for the first time, and I saw the suffering that the dislocation of 2,000 plus people caused, more than 150 children and many, many people, as I mentioned, from protected classes. We were also displaced as a church, and because people were displaced at Crossroads, and then often 1 or 2 times more, we lost almost all of those who were part of our community. The city of Richfield has stepped in certain cases and has tried to be proactive in questions of housing, and I greatly appreciate your consideration of this issue and your dedication to maintaining affordable housing in Richfield and your respect for human dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Is there anybody else who would like to speak that hasn't filled out a card? Just want to make sure that everyone has a chance. All right, seeing none. Did anybody call in previously? I know we're not doing live calls, but okay, just want to check. Thank you. All right, with that, then, we will move to approval of the minutes of the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of December 16th, 2024. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move approval. Commissioner Supple.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes have been approved. Taking us to item number 1, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion for approval?
Motion to approve?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any questions, comments, concerns? All right, seeing none. All those in favor to approve the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda has been approved. Taking us to item number 2, the consent calendar, and I will hand it over to Executive Director Peelman.
Thank you, Chair Vries-Daniels, members of the board. The consent calendar contains several separate items which are acted upon by the HRA in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and recommended actions have also been approved. No further HRA action on those items is necessary. However, any HRA commissioner may request that an item be removed from the consent calendar and placed on the regular agenda for HRA discussion and action. All items listed on the consent calendar are recommended for approval. Item A tonight, consideration of a resolution authorizing the execution of a developer agreement with the West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust, doing business as Homes Within Reach, for the acquisition, rehabilitation, and sale of houses under the New Home Program. Item B, consider a resolution approving an extension of a contract for private redevelopment with Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative for the development of 6613 to 6625 Portland Avenue South. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar.
Thank you. Are there any considerations of anything that would like to be removed from the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, is there a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
I move approval. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent calendar has been approved. All right, item number 4, Executive Director Peelman.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Julie Urban, Assistant Director, to present the item.
Thank you. Chair Vries-Daniels, members of the HRA. 3 Richfield apartment communities, New Orleans Court, Richland Court, and Winton House, were recently listed for sale after having been under the same ownership and management for many decades. The properties, containing a total of 236 units, are located along 77th Street at Wentworth and on 14th and Cedar Avenues. The properties were built in the 1960s and are considered naturally occurring affordable housing or NOAA properties. The buildings contain a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, and rent levels are considered affordable to households earning between 50% and 60% of the area median income. The properties are also currently home to 43 Housing Choice Voucher or Section 8 households and 5 Kids at Home program families. Hempel Real Estate is seeking to purchase the properties and maintain their affordability. Hempel is a local real estate firm that has acquired and preserved several NOAA communities over the past few years in St. Paul and West St. Paul. Hempel would utilize equity from the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund's NOAA Impact Fund, which contributes equity to NOAA acquisitions in exchange for preserving affordability for 15 years. Hempel is requesting assistance from the city's Housing and Redevelopment Authority to be able to ensure that affordability, to limit rent increases, and to undertake rehabilitation work in the amount of around $2.5 million. Hempel is seeking up to $1.77 million in financial assistance from the HRA in exchange for limiting rents and capping resident income levels, which would enable the properties to qualify for 4D tax status. The 4D tax classification offers the properties a combined annual savings estimated at $352,050, and that's using the Pay 2025 values and tax rates. Following a due diligence period, Hempel will be prepared to request a specific amount of assistance from the HRA, and a formal agreement will be brought to the HRA for consideration likely in February. To prepare for that agreement and provide direction to both staff and to Hempel, staff is recommending that a memorandum of understanding be approved that lays out Hempel and the HRA's commitment to exploring HRA financial assistance for the project under the following terms. Up to $1.57 million in the form of a 15-year forgivable deferred loan, up to $200,000 in apartment remodeling loans, rent and income limits in all 1- and 2-bedroom units at 60% of the AMI, which would qualify the units for 4D tax status. Rent and income limits in all 3-bedroom units at 70% of the AMI. Acceptance of Section 8 and kids at home rental assistance, and required meetings of property management and staff to share tenant-landlord resources and introduce Section 8 kids at home and public safety staff. The forgivable loan would be provided from the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. A small amount of funding does remain in the trust fund. However, additional funds would need to be transferred from the spending plan in order to meet the full $1.57 million commitment. The apartment remodeling loans can be funded through repayments that the current property owner will need to make upon sale of the properties. The cost burden for the 4D tax classification is shifted to other taxpayers. However, that shift will be offset by new tax capacity that will be added to the city's tax base in 2026 upon the decertification of 2 large tax increment financing districts. Because the classification affects the city's tax capacity, the City Council will also be asked to consider the request, and consideration of the formal agreement by the HRA will follow council action. That council action is scheduled for next Tuesday. Supporting the purchase of the properties by a preservation-oriented buyer like Hempel guarantees continued affordability for the properties and offers many benefits to the residents and the community, including the following: housing stability for the 477-plus residents, including no displacement of current residents; preservation of the affordability of larger apartment units, including 24 3-bedroom and 132 2-bedroom apartments; preservation of housing for 43 Housing Choice Voucher and 5 kids at home households; and continued partnership with a preservation-oriented owner to provide more deeply affordable housing opportunities for these rental assistance clients, the majority of whom earn less than 30% of the area median income. An investment of up to $2.5 million in physical improvements to the aging buildings, including safety and security, building mechanicals, roofs and windows, energy efficiency measures, amenity improvements, paint, flooring, lighting, and kitchen upgrades. And finally, local ownership with in-house property management services, which offers opportunities for the city to partner to the benefit of residents. Failure to support a preservation-oriented buyer could result in the properties being purchased by a market-rate buyer who could raise rents, displace residents, and/or displace our rental assistance residents. Following the work session on January 14th, the developer was able to obtain additional information from the seller's broker regarding the other offers that were made on the property. According to the broker, there were 3 other offers in the best and final round for purchase of the 3 properties, all of which were from groups seeking to flip to fully renovate and resell the properties. The broker stated that one of these offers would most likely be accepted if Hempel was unable to move forward. So there were several questions and requests for additional information at the work session, and a lot of the information has been provided in the staff report. I won't go over that unless you have additional questions for me, and I'm happy to answer questions. And the developer representative from Hempel is also here if you have questions for them. Thank you.
Thanks. Before we move to a motion, I'll just pause for questions for staff or the developer if anyone has any. There will be time for commentary and additional questions after there is a motion, if there is a motion as well. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a question for the developer because one of the people that spoke at open forum mentioned a residence council, and we have that there would be, I've got to scroll back to it, required meetings with the property management to share staff and tenant and landlord residences. Are you open to having tenant councils and those types of things?
Yes, please. And state your name.
Hello, Mayor Supple and members of the commission. I am Josh Krisnak. I'm the CEO of Hempel Real Estate. So one of the most important things that we do with all of our properties each year is we do tenant surveys. These go out once or twice a year. It's the first thing we do, and right off the bat what we're looking for is if there's any kind of issues. On top of that, we have a 24-hour line that we're always answering calls and service requests and so forth. Then, a couple times a year, we have tenant gathering parties. What we've found is the best way for you to retain your tenants is to actually have your tenants know each other. And so when our tenants know each other and they become friends with each other, they want to stay in the building. And so we are in constant contact with our tenants. both, through our kind of more technical stuff like our surveys, but then also the gatherings that we have a couple of times a year throughout the year. Oftentimes at those gatherings is when you do hear about things that are either going great or things that they may have suggestions for, because they know they've got everyone's ear at that point.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for being here. A few questions. During this period with the memorandum of understanding is in place, what do you expect to learn that's different than what we know today? Is there some expectation that cost savings will be unearthed or some other structure of the transaction will be known at that time that we can talk about?
Sure, Commissioner Young, members of the HRA, this is their due diligence period, which started last week, and so they're going to be doing inspections of the property, and so the hope is to refine and know more clearly what that rehab dollar amount will be, and then come back to us with that specific amount of a request. The other thing we'll learn in this period is if the council is in support of the tax 4D tax classification.
Right. If, for instance, we don't approve this, and I know we're looking at a memorandum of understanding, which allows everybody to go forward and talk about the details and look at the facts. Let's say this doesn't go forward at all. Is there anything that can be done for the 43 housing choice voucher residents to help them find housing? Does Richfield have any resources to help them?
So I could just point to when the Crossroads at Penn converted to the concierge, the best that we could offer to people was that because we locally administer Section 8, we have relationships with those folks, and so our 2 full-time equivalents staff people were available to try to help people find housing, which was, a lot of it was in Edina or Bloomington, but so we can provide that kind of assistance. In terms of finances, no, we wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. Also, in the case of the Crossroads, we tried to get sort of an extension from the property owner to say, can you give our Section 8 clients a longer period of time? That broke down when lawsuits started to get filed. But so those are the kinds of things that we would certainly attempt to do. A lot of these folks are longtime clients. They've lived in these buildings for many years. So we know them and do what we can to help. But there's only so many owners in Richfield who accept Section 8.
Sure.
But we also have relationships with other housing authorities and can reach out, but there's a limit to what we can do.
Okay. And my concern about this going forward is that property taxes will be increased for everybody throughout the city. And I know it's only $10, and $10 to some of us isn't a big deal, and $10 to others is a big deal. And I have that concern about this overall proposal. If you go forward with the MOU, will you be able to explore ways to limit that tax increase on everybody, or is that already baked into the structure and cannot be changed?
So first, I'd say that people's taxes won't necessarily be raised. The tax capacity of the city is going to lower. However, because we have 2 tax increment districts coming online next year, that is going to make up for the difference in the lowered tax capacity, and so people won't necessarily see their taxes change in terms of a dollar amount. I mean, our hope is perhaps it could be less, but there's lots that go, there's still budgets that have to be gone through and stuff, so we can't. At this point, we're estimating based on this year's conditions, right?
Okay, so the $9.97, whatever it is not a foregone conclusion at this point. Could be 0, could be nothing.
Commissioner Young, right. Our hopes are that no one's bill will go up next year, that the city will be able to maintain or only slightly increase their levy, that these TIF districts will roll off, and so they will increase the tax capacity by more than we are decreasing the tax capacity through this action, and hopefully people would actually see their property taxes lower. The action to approve a 4D does impact the tax capacity. There are just all of these other levers that are also moving, and the hope is that no one would actually see a $9.77 cent increase in their taxes because of this action.
If I could ask a follow-up specifically on the last question, and if you have more, please continue after this. But just to be clear, it would be $9.77 approximately more than it would otherwise be if not for this action, right? It's just the TIF thing may sort of disguise that this year.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And just so I'm clear, this is one of the first bigger votes that I'll take on the HRA. We are approving the ability for you to move forward, work with the developer to negotiate the structure, to learn more about the transaction, and then a final approval, if we get that far, will happen at our next HRA meeting.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry, just to add, the council will take action on this next week. And the council, your approval here is contingent upon the council also okaying the assistance and therefore the 4D tax classification. So in addition to you, there is another body that will vote on this.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
So I think you've answered most of my questions that I'm about to ask, but I wanted to make sure before we vote that we were clear about the next steps. So it sounds like there's going to be plenty of opportunities for the public to weigh in on this matter. If we go forward with it, they'll get to talk about it and talk to the city council. And if that goes forward again, they'll have another chance at the HRA. So there's plenty of opportunities for people to weigh in on this matter. And I think Commissioner Young talked about what happens if we say no or if we say yes. So I think that's been covered. But I just wanted to make sure for anybody that's listening that there is more opportunities coming that people can weigh in on this. So is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. There is a scheduled meeting with the city council next Tuesday. The packet will be posted for that. You can look at the information on the agenda here. And then there will be hopefully a second meeting with the HRA in February where a draft of a final contract would come before the board, and that would be another opportunity to comment.
Okay, that was my concern. I wanted to make sure we got community input and that everybody was aware of it.
I had a question, you and I spoke earlier about the budget for the 1.57 million, that it does fit into our current plans for what we have planned for the HRA currently. So just wanted to clarify that we are shifting some funds within our different buckets, but we do have enough to cover it and feel stable within the HRA funds for that amount as well.
Yes, so it's not specifically in the budget, but that's one of the things we talk about when we approve the budget, right, is that we don't always know what comes up. But there is funding in the spending plan, which is money that has to get committed this year. A project has to be underway yet by the end of this year. And we have about 2.3 million in uncommitted funds in there. So if we don't get them committed any other way, they would end up in the trust fund most likely anyway. So, thank you. So yes, there's funds available.
Okay.
Are you ready for a motion?
Yes, I am ready for a motion if there's no other current questions. Go ahead.
So I'll move to adopt a resolution approving the execution and delivery of a memorandum of understanding with Hempel Holding LLC.
And I'll second.
All right, it has been moved and seconded. We'll pause for comments, questions, and concerns. Yes, go ahead.
If I could speak to my motion. I'm supportive of this as I believe the benefits to the community outweigh the trade-offs. We will be preserving a good deal of affordable housing with many 2- and 3-bedroom units, which is a hard thing to find. It's hard to get affordable housing for that size. It also helps to make sure there are options for our rental assistance programs, and I believe there is a significant risk of gentrification and displacement of a lot of our community members, and this option mitigates that risk, in my opinion. I also think it's important to be clear that this is not setting a precedent for future policy. We need to study the whole 4D issue for some of the things that came up here, because it does affect the entire community and the tax capacity. But in these unique circumstances, I believe it's best for the city to move forward on this proposal. These 3 complexes have a lot of our 2- and 3-bedroom affordable units, as I said. They accept housing vouchers, and they're home to 66 students. We are already struggling to find affordable housing for those residents whose income is in the 30% of the AMI or lower bracket. And a lot of the people living in these complexes that's where they are. So I don't want to lose the housing we already have for them, because then we have an even bigger problem trying to find housing for people that are at 30% of the AMI. Another unique circumstance is the 2 TIF districts that are decertifying, which will greatly offset the impact on the taxpayers, although possibly not entirely. But this is a unique time when we can do this without raising taxes a great deal on everyone else, because those TIF districts are decertifying. And so I think that weighs in factor of the decision. I'm okay with transferring funds into the trust fund, as this is the type of thing we set it aside for. And if it's my understanding from talking to staff that the amount of subsidy per unit is similar to other projects that we have approved in the past. It's just this is a big lot of units, so it looks like a lot of money. So I think that if you divide it out by unit, it's not much different than other things. And staff can perhaps speak to that more later if it comes before us again. I did like the idea that came up tonight about looking into non-monetary asks of the developer as part of this deal, like having the tenant council or the property management meeting with the city. And I think that that's something that we should look forward to and encourage. But again, overall, I think the benefits seem to outweigh the trade-offs. I've thought long and hard about all the questions that have been asked. I do think it's important to consider all the other residents in the community, because when we look at it, we are not we're not a like overly rich community, but we all work together and we build community, and I think this is going to benefit everyone. So while we don't have tons of money, I think this is a good use of that money, and it's a good way for all of us to stick together. So I believe this is a good use of our housing money, and I'm in support of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I still have some skepticism, but I think I am going to be voting yes tonight. The main concerns, and I want to thank staff for providing all the details, the main concern I had is that our other options in the community are not significantly more expensive than the rates that this developer is committing to with the 60 and 70% AMI. But this is unusual, as Commissioner Supple noted, in that it has so many 2 and 3 bedroom units, in that we don't have any ability to compel normal private owners to accept Section 8 otherwise, and so this allows us to ensure stability for those households. And that we don't have anything else immediately on the horizon that we're not already committed to. So although there's opportunity cost, it's sort of an opportunity cost against a theoretical thing for a clear good. I certainly share Commissioner Young's concerns in general about 4D, and that we are kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul in that tax relief. But it's also tough to know like how much of that we should consider versus maybe that was an imperfect policy decision at the state level to shift such a low rate. Obviously, the intent of that law was not for cities to not subsidize affordable housing because of the tax consequences. I hope the state maybe eases off that, but recognizing where we're at now, given the lack of other projects available to subsidize, given the need here and the uniqueness of the 2 and 3 bedroom units, I am okay moving forward tonight.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I would agree with what other commissioners have expressed tonight. I think this actually is a very worthy project for use of HRA funding. For the reasons stated that there's quite a few 2 and 3 bedroom units, which are kind of very precious type of units in our community, especially for affordable housing. I know when I learned of like the 4D classification, I did have some reservations about that, because that shifting of taxing capacity to other people, I just really wanted to make sure that we weren't creating a precedent. And I know we've talked about precedent, and it seems like people are kind of on board that we're going to make sure that this isn't a precedent. Property taxes, I think, are a real serious issue, and I know that I've heard a lot of people say, and I agree with it, that the one flaw in the property tax is there's no relation to your ability to pay. A lot of times we think of seniors who are on fixed incomes as having difficulty, but there are other folks as well, people who they're laid off from their job because of illness or because they have to be a caregiver. And when you lose income like that, well, the property tax bill doesn't change. So I realize it's a very nominal amount to shift for this particular project, But, I think we really have to be concerned and keep those property taxes and implications of property taxes at a kind of a real high priority of concern. But I would support this because I do think, and actually the 4D classification actually is not an issue right before this body, but the city council. I think the real issue before this body is with the memorandum of understanding is, are we committed to helping fund the project? And I think this is a very worthy project of HRA funding.
Anything further? All right. I agree with what has been said. I think that these properties are hard to come by. And while I do agree that the tax status is, call it odd, to have to consider that, it is happening at the right time. That may not be a very visible burden in the kind of upcoming years. And this moment in time, I feel differently about it. And I think it's important to put money where we say our community lives. And this is my, I think, 9th year on the HRA. And it is hard to come by affordable housing and these sort of apartments. And so losing it is really hard. And so I'm incredibly supportive of moving forward with this MOA and excited to see it hopefully move forward. All right, if there's no other comments, yes, go ahead.
This is not directly on the vote, but I do want to say publicly, I do think we should be talking to our legislators about things like people having to take Section 8. Because, if there's no place for someone to go, it doesn't do any good to have a housing voucher. And I think we need to have that policy discussion and think of all of the pros and cons of that, as well as the discussion about the pros and cons of the 4D tax thing. I think it was done for good reasons, but there are some unintended consequences. And so I just hope that we can continue the policy discussions. But I do believe that this is a unique situation that we're voting on now. Thank you.
I just want to thank everyone for coming as well. So it's lovely to see citizens come out and participate. So thank you for everyone who came. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion has been approved. All right, thank you. This takes us to item number 5, HRA discussion items. Are there any HRA discussion items? All right, seeing none. Item number 6, Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Chair Vries-Daniels. I have 2 quick items. First, I wanted to let you know that in the coming month or 2, we're planning to re-release the RFI. That's the request for interest in the properties that the HRA owns at 494 and Highway 77 near the tunnel. Those are the Metro Sales and EcoSmart former buildings. The commercial market continues to be difficult, but I think it's worth our time to put that out there again and see if there's any good interest in those sites. So Economic Development Manager Youngquist will be working on that, and that should be out soon. And then I did want to let you know that the work session scheduled for next Tuesday for the HRA's part in that has been canceled. So you have your Tuesday evening. The HRA has their Tuesday evening free. I want to remind those on the council that you do still have a work session on a different item, so you don't get to skip out. But those are my items. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That takes us to item number 7, claims. Is there a motion to approve claims?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Claims have been approved. And that adjourns us. Thank you, everyone.